what I wanted to talk about is put the government services and the use of cloud in an international context. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the global challenges that face all governments, including India and Canada. So, but first of all, to put it in context, as said in the introduction, I'm a 30-year public servant myself from the Government of Canada, Government of Ontario in particular, that's equivalent to one of your states. And I was corporate chief strategist responsible for leading the government's policy and implementation of e-government, as well as the enterprise-wide information technology strategy. I joined Cisco Internet Business Solutions Group in 2006. We're the strategic advisory arm of Cisco. We work in Prakash in my case, we work with governments in terms of how they can conceptualize and think about how technology can be used to transform their operations. So for example, I've been coming since 2006 and working with the Department of Information Technology, as it was at that time, when it was still in the conceptualization and early approval stage of the National E-Governance Plan. So all governments, as I mentioned, face similar challenges. They have to, at the same time, protect information that's highly confidential, personal, private, or could provide some commercial advantage, at the same time as there are global trends towards opening up information, making it more available. Governments are trying to attract top talent at the same time as the private sector is attracting that talent. And government, because under public scrutiny all the time, has to manage budgets down, keep costs down, including salaries. There's a strong focus in all organizations, but especially in government, to make sure the internal operations are smooth, withstand all sorts of scrutiny. But governments are known for their silos, both horizontal and vertical silos. They're famous for that. Coming now from the corporate side of things, I can tell you there are also silos in the corporate sector, but they're particularly strong within government. At the same time, there's huge opportunities for interoperability and better service with the linked services. But how do we do that? How do we expand services for individuals at the same time as keeping costs down? So, you've got public policy on the one hand, trying to improve things, make things better, at all times trying to make things better for citizens. And you've got technology that's creating new opportunities each and every day. How do we bring those together in this context? And what is it that the IT organizations are thinking about at this time? We heard this morning from the keynote speaker, Peter Cochran, some pretty negative concepts about how IT departments are not keeping up. Coming from an IT department and now working with IT departments, it's true that there's a real struggle, and the IT departments are working as fast as they can to try and stay on top of all the trends, take advantage of those trends and opportunities. And I think I can say that the world is changing and has changed. The public service IT staff that I know and work with are fully aware of all the opportunities, want to make them available to the government workforce and to citizens. And they're staying up at night working on many of these challenges about how to balance complexity of an IT environment with simplicity for users. How to balance, some applications are highly customized for 1 or 2 users, but you need to scale, in India's case, to 1.2 billion users. All those challenges the IT departments are working very hard on at all times. We think there's a significant opportunity to bring together information technology and the current trends towards the cloud with public sector innovation to provide significant improvement in terms of public services, engagement of citizens, at the same time as helping build economies and keeping costs down. And that's what I wanted to talk about for the remainder of this presentation. How do we write the next chapter? How do we build cloud computing into the environment to help address all these challenges simultaneously? So cloud computing, as you've heard already today, you'll hear for the remainder of the conference, is changing the whole paradigm of how computing works. I won't go through all the basics, but this slide is a great simplification of how it's moving from sort of siloed organizations dedicated to shared self-service, using on-demand, pay-as-you-go, all those great concepts about how to get better value for the investment in information technology. For those of you who are here at the introduction to Cloud 101, a place you may want to go is the NIST site to look at some of the basic definitions of cloud computing, because they're very relevant, especially when you're talking about public sector. So when you're thinking of a public cloud, which are services that are accessible from anywhere by anyone through a public cloud environment, compared to a private cloud, which is available only to users in one organization. Or a community is a group of organizations that may come together to share cloud computing resources. Or hybrid cuts across all of those. And of course, you can get software, you can provide a development platform where you can get infrastructure on the cloud. And we've talked a lot about the essential characteristics of measured, elastic, on-demand, and built on the network. Cloud is, as I think we heard right from the first session, where security came up again and again and again and again and again, both in the presentation and in the Q&A. Cloud, if it's going to work, is absolutely essential that there's a trusted environment. So before you get to anything else, you need to ensure that you're taking care of security, control, service level management, and compliance. If there are public policy rules, legislative rules, or various other compliance environment that you need to pay attention. And we all know that to be the case in the public sector especially. So we believe that using the network as the platform, you can actually bring together the benefits of both worlds. You can have all the benefits of your dedicated virtualized data center as well as cloud computing to become a trusted, flexible environment, on-demand, secure, and available right across the public sector. And that's what we've been working on with the last couple of years, working with the Government of India. So in the public sector, most governments around the world are looking at private cloud environment. In other words, a dedicated private cloud that's available for their use, and that's because of the sensitivity of public sector applications. They're also looking at accessing some commodity-type services from the public cloud as well, but for the main applications, the type of applications that Prakash was talking about that are being worked on through the mission mode projects of the National Development Plan, a private cloud is the environment that we're recommending and that most governments are looking at around the world. So private clouds offer the benefits of public clouds, but with additional security around them that may not be available in a public cloud environment. So it's fair to say that virtually every government is looking at cloud, and they're all at various stages of moving towards that environment. I picked just a few. The United States has adopted under the past administration and the current administration a cloud-first policy, which means before departments go any other route, they need to look, is that service, is that application, is that technology already available? And if it is already available, then they need to access it through the U.S. cloud environment, and they've set up the infrastructure for doing that. They're not allowed to reinvent the wheel unless there's a strong reason. Japan is looking at a smart cloud strategy. New Zealand has an interesting dimension. They're calling it an onshore cloud. In other words, they're very, very sensitive to things like data control, data privacy, so they're requiring their government cloud-type applications to be hosted within New Zealand. That's the sovereignty issue that a lot of governments are facing. The European Union is looking at standards, the legal framework governance, to how they can implement cloud environment across the European Union countries. The United Kingdom has adopted a different model. They also have a G-Cloud strategy, but in that strategy, it's all about buying, managing, and using cloud services, starting with public cloud. So that's an exception. They're looking at what are all the commodity-type services that are out there, and they want to make it easy to buy, transparent, significant savings, and encourage learning and experimentation by right across the government, all the departments. Get out, in other words, go for speed and transparency of procurement to get services and applications up and running. The Government of India, we feel, is a great opportunity. And this is a slide that Prakash and I put together to put on one page. What's the situation? What's the complication? What are the questions and what are the answers? And in effect, as Prakash has already well outlined, we think the main issue right now is that infrastructure is moving far ahead of the services. So how to accelerate the availability of services? And how to do that in an environment where the staff don't have the capacity, where it takes as long as 2 years for a complex procurement to take place. First, you have to hire a consultant to help you with the procurement, then you have to have another consultant to do the design, and then before you can get the implementation. So is there an opportunity to accelerate the deployment of these services? And we think the answer to that is yes, and Prakash has already presented some of our ideas around how we think that can happen. So the Government of India has now published a couple of papers. They're available on the website. I'll give you that site in a minute. It focuses on an overall vision for the GI Cloud, or Government of India Cloud, which is to accelerate the delivery of these services through the National E-Governance Plan. They want rapid deployment of applications, efficient service delivery, standards and interoperability, and optimum usage of what they already have on the ground. And for those of you who aren't familiar, picking up the question earlier, the drivers of the National E-Governance Plan itself are getting services to the common man in his locality. It very much includes driving out corruption wherever possible in terms of the National E-Governance Plan, improving service in terms of timeliness, convenience, cost, taking out corruption. So it's very much based on e-services being a means to do that. So there are 2 papers posted. One is the Government of India Cloud Strategic Direction paper. One is the Adoption and Implementation Roadmap, about 15 days for comment. I just picked a couple of slides. One is that they too have gone the cloud first approach, which is saying that we want to take an approach that first you should evaluate what options are available, and if it already exists, and take that application and use it. So existing applications that have already been built should be evaluated and made available in the cloud wherever possible. So they're looking at all 3 layers of cloud: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, so compute, storage, network, and application development platforms. They're also looking at software as a service and an application store, which are 2 concepts which have been sort of merged together. So there'll be delivery of e-services, could be a thing like a payment gateway or something like that, or a full application available through an app store environment, so easy to find, easy to use across the whole of India. There are lots and lots of challenges to be managed, and I've chosen to highlight just one here, and that's governance. I think the governance challenge is huge, but all the work that we've seen so far is they're working on this very carefully and with lots of consultation with the states, with the private sector. The idea is to get the balance right in terms of having a national strategy which respects the role of the states and involves the states. Having appropriate control of an application, or who gets access and use an application, at the same time as unleashing innovation across the country, across departments, and by users as well as the government workforce. Getting the benefits of economies of scale and the benefits of competition are at the same time being built into this environment. All of that supported by cloud architecture and technology. So we believe, and both Prakash and I were at the 16th National E-Governance Conference in Jaipur last week, and it's my observation from there, as well as what we're seeing today and our work on this task force, that progress in India is at an inflection point. And this isn't just a cute way to link it to the title of this conference. Enough is out there, enough is being done, enough is underway that I think with cloud we could see a significant scaling up of the availability of applications and services to the people of India. This is the roadmap that the government has laid out in its plan. Right now they're right at the beginning in terms of that enabling environment, enabling policy, but they're already beginning to work in parallel in terms of getting some architecture started, building on some standards. Then there's creating the institutional infrastructure in terms of the NIUs that Prakash talked about, assessing the existing infrastructure, what are the gaps in the infrastructure, filling that in, and then beginning the implementation, migration, getting the apps up and running, and then the overall operate, manage, improve, renew, continuous improvement, and expand over time. So overall, we believe that it's a real win-win-win opportunity for India right now in moving down the cloud path. A win, ultimately, at the end of the day, in terms of improving government services available to the people right across India, wherever they may live. A win for the government in terms of accelerating progress on applications and doing it in a context of very, very scarce resources, especially the people resource. I would say that's the toughest challenge that India is facing right now within the government. And thirdly, a win in terms of economic and social development for India, involving the private sector as partners and building the cloud, but also the ability of Indians themselves to get access to information services that they need, and that will help them be competitive in their own day-to-day entrepreneur type activities, or just a better quality of life in terms of access to information and services that they require in their day-to-day. So with that, just want to thank you very much and take any questions you have. If none, that's fine too. I will say I'm an eternal optimist here. I know some of the questions in the first session were focusing on the challenges, but my own experience in Canada, we used a phrase of start small, scale fast. I'm sure you've heard that many times. And I think India is very much at that implementation testing stage, and now it's just improvement from here on in. And definitely the tone last week at the government's conference was the people are beginning to learn from the applications that are out there and how to make them better. So if there are no questions, then actively worked in Canada and you actively working with different governments, how do you think is India still thinking? Is that thinking phase or compared to other countries? Yes, they are, especially one of the biggest challenges right now that India is at is moving from this being viewed as a technology project to a transformation of government services project, and moving this out from IT people into the applications domains, into the departments who can begin to think about how they can modernize processes that are in many cases decades old, in many cases paper-based. That does create an opportunity for leapfrogging, because they can learn from other jurisdictions, they can eliminate unnecessary processes. But until that happens, until there's champions in the domain departments, it's going to be a challenge. They have to take hold of this and begin to see the opportunities.
In fact, what problem with our case is this is first time automation. From paper or manual system we are going there. In their cases, they have been having this for 2 decades. So they have made systems out of different systems, and from there they are optimizing, cutting costs. So that's the difference of approach and where we are.
And I think that no one should expect it to be perfect the first time out. The idea is to get started and then improve it. So I do see progress being made in many departments in many states. There's many others where nothing's happening, but I think once they begin to see the results, they'll build some confidence, as well as pressure outside in will happen. People will begin to say, that department can do it, why can't we? That'll be
in fact, another thing which is going to come very soon is electronic service delivery bill, which many states have already done it, like Delhi has. If you apply for a service within certain period, you will get it. Now that is something which is going to put lots of pressure on the states. Once national law comes into being, everyone will be, and then the policymakers who are today, policymakers meaning the ministers or secretaries or directors who don't realize that today, tomorrow once that ESD comes, they will realize what kind of monkey sitting on their shoulder. So, yes, sir.
Our Lok Sabha has passed revised company bill where 2% of the net profit of the corporate they have to spend on the minimum 2% of the net profit on the corporate social responsibility. There are more than 50,000 companies who are reporting to the registrar of company safety. Is there any system to know by the public and not, because we are talking about the future growth and inclusion, where they can track whether the companies have actually spent 2% of the net profit of the corporate responsibility, or they are just slipping away. The second question is, Government has also passed, statutory, act where 20% of the purchases by the government, PSUs and state government and government has to be procured from micro, small and medium enterprises. And that 20%, the 4% of 20% has to be procured from scheduled caste and scheduled tribe enterprises. Can you think of some procedure where the association and the public at large would know whether the policies are being implemented properly or not, whether the benefits for whom they are meant are reaching to them or not? It's a very important area where millions of persons are concerned.
Problem is I'm still taken as a government officer, though I left government some 4.5 years back. But anyway, I'll try to answer that.
I can give a generic answer.
I mean,
I can give a generic
you
answer.
first give it and
I will say that many governments, and I think India is looking at this too, have adopted a public performance measurement approach to major indicators that matter, so that if you can go on websites, for example, across Canada and the United States, the governments will have performance measures that are important, and then they'll publicize the results in terms of how are we achieving that. And so I think, for example, in state of New York, city of New York, the mayor he's got expectations from every single department in terms of streets being cleaned, snow being plowed, garbage being picked up, and they have to report every month on are they meeting those targets. So it's all about transparency. Then people have that information, they can then push back and demand better services. I know that the 12th five-year plan for India is building performance measures into it that they intend to post. What I don't know is whether they're also planning to track those publicly.
Technically speaking, it can be done. Like in the city state itself, 10 years back they had started tender information system. From there they were putting in public domain expenditure being made on different aspects. So all different goods and services which are bought by government were divided into 99 categories, and people could have information any period you choose, and it used to give how much money has gone on road, on school building, on things like that. And when we did that, first time we saw 2%, almost 2% budget was spent on tent and shamiana. I was also amazed that how come so much money is going on tent and shamiana. And then we realized that that particular year we had floods, and they had to put up lots of camps using tents, and that money was coming from that. Apart from that, many functions, MCT schools at that time, many MCT schools used to run in tents, not in Pakka structure. So this kind of tracking, if you want, it can be done, and especially when all departments are going for e-procurement, they can always track where they are buying it from. And your CSR thing, that has some provision has to be made in the reporting which is done to Ministry of Corporate Affairs. When they report the annual report which they give, there they have to write that okay, how much money they are spending on CSR. Unless until it is reported, it cannot be tracked. But so if the law has been made, I'm sure they will have this provision as well. No, so that others.
I just wanted to know, using cloud, is the security challenges are absolutely mitigated?
Yes, security, I wouldn't say they're automatically mitigated, but security can be built into the cloud framework in all sorts of ways, in terms of the encryption of the original data, in terms of how it's moved, in terms of where
Because
it's
public
moved.
cloud can also be vulnerable.
Yes.
It'll be.
It is one of the reasons why most governments are starting with looking at private cloud for their most sensitive applications. Just because until they're, 150% certain that security can be addressed, they like the idea of maintaining tight control over the information that they're holding in trust for the people of their jurisdiction. So that's why private cloud is currently being used by these companies.
In fact, the keynote speaker today covered this, and thereafter most of the speakers have covered this aspect. So it's what kind of features features you built into that. And as Joan was explaining, the governments mostly have gone for their own stuff. They're not using Amazon or others, but they're using their own. And so that is basically they want to ensure that they are 100%, 150% sure that the data will, they have full control over the resources, underlying resources.